Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. One of the main issues from the 2020 election was that of court packing. Some people think that court packing is stacking the court to favor an ideology. For example, with Trump's 3 confirmations during his term, the court is 6-3, 6 Republicans, 3 Democrats. But that's not what court packing means. What court packing means is adding a lot more to the court. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to do back during the 1930s during the Great Depression, so he can get his New Deal in. And like I said, it's a hotly debated issue and one that basically dominated the 2020 presidential election. And there's talk about it now. As a matter of fact, there's this from conservative Daily News, which reads the next step, pack the court. Joe Biden is not a moderate. Joe Biden is not a unifier. Joe Biden has no interest in working with Republicans or even with Congress. Joe Biden was sent to Washington to promote and initiate a progressive agenda put together by the radical left of the Democrat Party. Joe Biden is a perfect puppet for the left. He has been around for over 50 years and has a tremendous face and name recognition, even though very few can tell you about his accomplishments for his decades of swamp dwelling. The reason for that is that there were really none. He used to hang his hat on the crime bill until someone decided that it was racist. Don't ask Joe for his contributions to the betterment of our country, as he has no recollection. In just a few short months, the Biden administration has destroyed our southern border, basically making us an open country. He has taken credit for the groundwork put together by the Trump team for distributing the COVID-19 vaccine. He has interfered with state legislation, resulting in corporate boycotts while resurrecting visions of Jim Crow. He's pushing an infrastructure bill that does so many things, but merely a few address infrastructure needs. He is setting a new bar for sending executive orders, even though his party has control of Congress. He is promoting new laws and executive orders to shred the Second Amendment and infringe on the rights of gun owners. Now he is turning his sights to packing the Supreme Court. He said he would do it, and here he goes. Packing the Supreme Court is important to Democrats because with the 3 justices confirmed during the Trump term, the conservatives appear to have a strong majority. That depends on which side of the bed Justice Roberts starts his day. He's been a huge disappointment to those of us who counted on him seeing issues through conservative lenses. To turn the tide and ensure a liberal court for many years to come, the Democrats want to add as many as 6 new justices to the court, bringing the 60 conservative court to a 9-6 liberal rubber stamp. Joe Biden ran away from this initiative during the campaign. He refused to answer direct questions as to whether he would attempt to pack the court, but his running mate, Kamala Harris, was committed to the idea. And now we have Joe Biden setting up a committee to study the possibility of adding seats to the court. All of this makes for great topics for a political opinion blog, but to be honest, and I hope I always am, this stuff is scary. The changes that Biden and his party are pushing are transformative. We need to stay aware of his actions by listening to what he says, but more importantly, watching what he does. After all, the pocketbook is open and the pen is full of ink. A dangerous combination for conservatives and the entire country. Now notice what it said here. The Democrats want to add as many as 6 new justices to the court, bringing the 6-3 conservative court to a 9-6 liberal rubber stamp. Like I said earlier, that is what Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to do back during the 1930s. I forget what it was at the time, but he wanted a liberal court, and I think tradition said that there were only 9 justices, so like I said, people think that packing the court means stacking it one way or another. But that's not true. Packing it means adding more justices to the Supreme Court. And that's something that former Senator Harry Reid had said that Biden needs to be careful with that. This coming from discern.com. That's disrn.com. Former Senator Harry Reid, Democrat Nevada, said on Saturday, "We better be very, very careful in saying that we need to expand the Supreme Court." Reid's comments came after President Joe Biden created a federal commission on Friday to conduct a 6-month study on proposed changes to the Supreme Court. I have no problem with the commission, but I think the commission is going to come back and disappoint a lot of people, because I think they're going to come back and say we should just leave it alone, Reid said. The White House said that the commission would examine topics of the reform debate, including the court's role in the constitutional system, the length of service and turnover of justices on the court, the membership and size of the court, note that, the membership and size of the court, and the court's case selection rules and practices. I think it would be inappropriate at this time that after a long history we've had in the country to have term limits for judges, Reid said. When Reid was asked by CNN host Jim Acosta if he regretted eliminating the filibuster for most nominations by presidents in 2013, Reid said, "None whatsoever. As part of my changing rules, we were able to get a lot done in Obama's first term as President of the United States," Reid said. His first Congress was the most productive Congress in the history of the country. Now, while that might be true, and most of that was mostly liberal ideas and basically coming from the Alinsky playbook, my opinion, of course, with that. But yeah, I mean, one thing that I do agree with Harry Reid on is that that the commission may just say kind of leave it alone, and that they better be very careful in saying that they need to expand the Supreme Court. So, but yeah, and there's this from the PatriotPost.us, and it says Joe Biden moves back the Supreme Court. President Joe Biden, who with each passing week finds new ways to disgrace himself in the office to which he has been entrusted, is added once again, having seen his party fail to sufficiently affect the composition of the U.S. Supreme Court within our constitutionally agreed on framework. Biden on Friday signed an executive order establishing his presidential commission on the Supreme Court, which is tasked with, among other things, considering the membership and size of the court. So in other words, packing the high court. When we were kids on the playground, we had a word for this: cheating. Think about it. Any neighborhood kid who tried to change the rules of the game in order to gain an advantage was quickly and roundly set upon. We were just kids, but even back then we understood the difference between right and wrong. Joe Biden doesn't, or if he does, he simply doesn't care. And come to think of it, this backslapper has been lying and cheating about little things and big things his whole life, so why are we at all surprised? Regarding his plans, the Wall Street Journal reports, Biden ordered a commission to study Supreme Court changes such as adding seats, an idea pushed by progressives in his party that faces strong opposition from congressional Republicans. Mr. Biden said during his campaign that he would create a bipartisan commission to study expanding the court or creating term limits for justices. I agree with the term limits for justices. That is one thing I definitely agree with. And I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, The 36-member commission will be charged with completing its findings within 180 days of its first public meeting and will preside over a broad political moment for the future of the nation's high court. Biden is more than just a liar and a cheat. He's also a coward, utterly unwilling to tell the unhinged left rank of his party to pound sand. Despite his campaign waffling, this was the perfect opportunity to do just that. The perfect opportunity to pay just a modicum of lip service to his Inauguration Day promise. I pledge this to you, Biden said on January 20th, I will be a president for all Americans, and I promise you I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Alas, it wasn't meant to be, as the far-left New York Times reports. The president acted under pressure from activists pushing for more seats to alter the ideological balance of the court after President Donald J. Trump appointed 3 justices, including one to a seat that Republicans had blocked his predecessor, Barack Obama, from filling for almost a year. Now, the makeup of this 36-member bipartisan commission certainly won't be 1818, and its leadership is naturally leftist. But even if it were balanced, no self-respecting Republican or conservative should agree to be on that commission, though a few have. Agreeing to do so lends an air of legitimacy to it. But there is not a whiff of legitimacy to be found anywhere on a commission whose purpose is likely to make the case for packing the Supreme Court, or at the very least intimidating justices and judges to bow to progressive demands. In fact, leftist Justice Stephen Breyer acknowledged the problem. Those whose initial instincts may favor important structural change or other similar institutional changes, such as forms of court packing, shifting long and hard before they embody these changes in law, he said last week. There is currently a trust that the court is guided by legal principle, not politics, but, he warned, structural alteration motivated by the perception of political influence can only feed the latter perception, further eroding that trust. If President Unity asks, we should tell him what he failed to tell the hard leftists who put him up to this. Pound sand, Joe, pound sand. And like I said, I mean, pay, packing the court is wrong, but however, one thing that I do agree with Biden on, and this might very well be the only thing I might agree with him on, is we do need term limits for justices because, Thomas has been in it since 92, and I'm sure that there have been a few others who have been, in the past who have been around 40, 50 years, so they're more established, but, just like in the House and the Senate, we need a fresh rotation of people coming in, which is why I support term limits for Congress. We need term limits for the Supreme Court as well, especially those who have been in it for 30 years. As a matter of fact, Mark Levin, in his book, The Liberty Amendments, had even written about it. And now this book was written back in 2013, but he had written in it that the lengths of terms for the Congress. Now, keep in mind, this was pre Donald Trump. Justice Scalia and Justice Kennedy were 77 years old. Thomas is 65. Those are the top. Those would have been the first class. This would have been the first class of justices. Scalia, Kennedy, Thomas, Ginsburg, Breyer, Roberts, Alito, Sotomayor, and Kagan would be the last 3, or rather the last 4. So, but yeah, you had, and that was if this were applied right now, but So right now, you would have Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and I forget the third justice's name that Trump had. Oh, Brett Kavanaugh. Those three would those three would have their terms last until if the amendment for term limits on the Supreme Court would stand, those three would have those three justices would have their terms expired in 12 years. And you have Justice Thomas, who is the elder statesman, whose term would expire in 4 years. So, but yeah, I mean, we need term limits for the Supreme Court. I mean, I say probably, probably 16 years at the most. Once everything is paid out, and the nine that are there, now have been rotated out. So, but yeah, 16 years for Supreme Court justice, and yeah, that that's my take. Let me know yours below. And there's one more article. This from Arkansas Online, and the title is Biden sends commission to study high court changes. President Joe Biden on Friday ordered a 180 day of adding seats to the U.S. Supreme Court, making good on the campaign promise to establish a bipartisan commission to establish or to examine the subjects of expanding the court or setting term limits for justices. The president acted under pressure from activists pushing for more seats to alter the ideological balance of the court. After former President Donald Trump appointed 3 justices, including one to a seat that Republicans had blocked his predecessor, Barack Obama, from filling for almost a year. The result is a court with a stronger conservative 63-tilled with the addition of Trump's choices, including Amy Coney Barrett, who was confirmed to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just 4 days before last year's presidential election. Trump also appointed Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. But while Biden, a former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has asserted that the system of judicial nominations is getting out of whack, he has declined to say whether he supports altering the size of the court or making other changes like imposing term limits to the current system of lifetime appointments. Under the White House order establishing it, the commission is not set to issue specific recommendations at the end of its study, an outcome likely to disappoint activists. In his executive order Friday, the president created a 36-member commission that will examine the history of the court, past changes to the process of nominating justices, and the potential consequences to altering the size of the nation's highest court. The panel will be led by Bob Bauer, who served as White House counsel for Obama, and Cristina Rodriguez, a Yale Law School professor who served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel under Obama. Progressives say Republicans unfairly gained an advantage by blocking Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland in 2016, and they see adding seats, setting term limits, or instituting other changes as a way to offset the power of any one president to influence its makeup. Conservatives have decried the effort as court packing, similar to the failed effort by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s. The issue of whether to alter the size of the court, which has been set at 9 members since just after the Civil War, is highly charged, particularly when Congress is almost evenly divided between the two parties. An attempt to increase the number of justices would require approval of Congress and would be met by fierce opposition. However, there is growing recognition that the Supreme Court poses a danger to the health and well-being of the nation and even to democracy itself, said Aaron Belkin, director of the group Take Back the Court. A White House Judicial Reform Commission has a historic opportunity to explain the gravity of the threat and to help contain it by urging Congress to add seats, which is the only way to restore balance to the court. The panel of scholars, lawyers, political scientists, and former judges will produce a research paper designed to be an authoritative analysis of the issue. The goal, the people said, is not to settle on an answer, but to provide Biden, members of Congress, and the public an evaluation of the risks and benefits of making changes. The White House said the commission would examine the genesis of the reform debate and the court's role in the constitutional system, the length of service and turnover of justices on the court, the membership and size of the court, and the court's case selection rules and practices. The commission's members include liberal scholars like Lawrence Tribe, a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, and a leading progressive voice in the legal community, and Caroline Frederickson, former president of the American Constitution Society. But progressives may balk at some of the conservative members of the commission. They include Jack Goldsmith, a Harvard Law School professor who was a top Justice Department official under former President George W. Bush, Adam White, a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and a professor of George Mason University's Antonin Scalia Law School, and Keith Whittington, a professor of politics at Princeton University, who takes an originalist view of the Constitution. So it'll be interesting to see just what this commission comes up with. It'll also be interesting to gauge the public's view. And right now, I'd like to get your take on it. Comment down below what you think about the commission. Also, what do you think about the Supreme Court? Do you think that we need to add more seats to it? Do you think we need to keep it as is? Do you think we need term limits on the Supreme Court? And I'll see you in the next video. President Joe Biden was inaugurated 3 months ago, and in 2 years from today, we will be starting the 2024 election cycle. And there is one person who had made some sort of announcement as to whether she will run. This coming from my good friends over at townhall.com. Nikki Haley makes an announcement about her presidential prospects. Former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley made an announcement about her potential presidential run during an appearance in South Carolina on Monday. The former Trump administration official and former governor of South Carolina said that she would not launch a presidential campaign if the former president himself were to run for the White House again. Haley said that she would throw her support behind Trump if he ultimately decides to launch a third bid for the presidency. I will not run a President Trump brand, and I will talk to him about it, Haley told reporters. It's something that we will have a conversation about at some point. I asked Nikki this in a tweet from Meg Kennard of the AP. I asked Nikki Haley if she would support Donald Trump if he runs again in 2024. Yes, she told me. I would not run a President Trump brand, and then I would talk to him about it. She added that's something that we will have a conversation about at some point. Haley joined GOP criticism of Trump's role in the events of January 6, but maintained that the two have a great working relationship. I appreciated the way he let me do my job, she said of the former president. I thought we did some fantastically great foreign policy things together, and look, I just want to keep building on what we accomplished and not watch it get torn down. It was reported that Trump lashed out at establishment GOP figures over the weekend during a Republican National Committee meeting, including Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Now, it's interesting. Okay, like I said, I have a few people that I think if they want to run in 2024, then they have my support. One of which is Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. Maybe DeSantis. I'm not totally sure about that, but Rubio is definitely my number one choice. Also, there's probably Ted Cruz and Rand Paul if they decide to run again. Nikki Haley would be middle of the pack for me, as far as if she would run. Former President Trump, most definitely, but we're almost 2 years off from people declaring, so who knows what'll happen, but yeah, so Nikki Haley is making an announcement, and there's also this on that from newsmax.com, and it says Nikki Haley for President 2024, not if Trump runs. This by Jim Thomas. Nikki Haley, former South Carolina governor and United Nations ambassador, said she will only consider a run for president in 2024 if former President Donald Trump declines to, adding she would support Trump if he did decide to run. I would not run if President Trump ran, and I would talk to him about it, Haley told reporters Monday during a visit to South Carolina State University. That's something that we'll have a conversation about at some point if that decision is something that has to be made, the Hill reported. Haley has been a vocal supporter of her former boss and gave high praise to Trump earlier this winter at the Conservative Political Action Conference. Haley tweeted shortly after the speech, strong speech by President Trump about the winning policies of his administration and what the party needs to unite behind moving forward. The liberal media wants a GOP civil war. Not gonna happen. Haley served in the Trump administration as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations from 2017 to 2018. When asked if she would support Trump if he runs again, Haley responded yes. She indicated that she had a great working relationship with Trump. I appreciated the way he let me do my job, Haley said. The Hill reported, I thought we did some fantastically great foreign policy things together, and look, I just want to keep building on what we accomplished and not watch it get torn down. Haley has been candid at times with Trump, too, suggesting that the president let his backers down by not doing more to quell the January 6th storming of the Capitol. She then told Politico that she believed Trump was not going to run for federal office again. I think his business is suffering at this point, Haley said. I think he's lost any sort of political viability he was going to have. I think he's lost his social media, which meant the world to him. I mean, I think he lost the things that kept him running. Now, Trump has not ruled out a 2024 run, a possibility that might be keeping potential GOP presidential candidates waiting in the wings until he makes a final decision. So, he hasn't ruled it out, although according to what I had seen, it looks like he's definitely angling toward making a run for the presidency. But, it'll be interesting to see just what shapes up behind all that, and, whether the former president has what it takes to make another run. Keep in mind that it was Grover Cleveland back in the 1880s that had 3 consecutive runs for president. 1881 in 1884, in which he won. One in 1888, which he lost, and then again in 1992, which he won. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump will pull that off. But the Hill has more about it. So let's go right there. This is from the Hill. Nikki Haley says she will not run for president if Trump runs for president in 2024. Former ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, said on Monday that she would not mount a bid for the White House in 2024 should former President Donald Trump decide to run again. I would not run if President Trump ran, and I would talk to him about it, Haley told the Associated Press at a press conference. That's something that we'll have a conversation about at some point if that decision is something that has to be made. Haley, a former South Carolina governor and prospective candidate for the GOP's 2024 presidential nomination, said that she would support Trump if he makes another run for the White House. But she also acknowledged that it had been quite some time since she spoke with the former president. Asked about the last time she talked to Trump, Haley said that it had been after the 2020 presidential election, but before March 6, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol in an effort to disrupt the certification of the election results. Still, she said she had a great working relationship with Trump during her nearly 2-year tenure as his top envoy to the UN. I appreciated the way he let me do my job, she said. I thought we did some fantastically great foreign policy things together, and look, I just want to keep building on what we accomplished, and now watch it get torn down. There's still an undeniable tension between Trump and Haley, In an interview with Politico in the weeks after the January 6th riots at the Capitol, Haley delivered a scathing assessment of the former president, saying that it had been a mistake for Republicans to listen to him and predicting that he would find himself further and further isolated in the coming months and years. Now, in that same interview, she offered a clear assessment of his political future. He's not going to run for federal office again. But nearly 3 months removed from the end of his first and only term in the White House, Trump has continued to privately toy with the notion of a 2024 presidential comeback campaign, a reality that has frozen other potential GOP presidential candidates in their tracks as they wait to see what he decides. Now, Haley isn't the only Trump administration alum eyeing a potential White House bid in 2024. Trump's former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has been making rounds in Iowa and New Hampshire, the first 2 states to vote in presidential primaries. Other potential candidates include Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, and Republican Senators Marco Rubio of Florida, Rick Scott of Florida, Rick Scott too, and Tom Cotton. Haley's remarks on Monday offered perhaps the clearest indication yet of what Trump's possible entrance into the Republican presidential contest would mean for would-be rivals' own potential or own political prospects. Trump remains the most influential figure in the modern GOP, and competing with him as a primary contest is seen by many Republicans as a risky undertaking. Now that's true, and Rick Scott being in it, that would make 3 Floridians running, so could be pretty dicey, could be very interesting, but like I said, we're only about another 2 years out, so the first thing that'll be happening is the 2022 midterm election that Marco Rubio is involved in here in Florida, and based on what I had read, former President Trump is endorsing Marco Rubio for senator here in Florida, so could be interesting to, is bound to be very intriguing as to what'll happen. And we have the Associated Press article from Meg Kennard, which have been quoted in previous articles, but this is a full article. Haley says she'll back Trump and stand on if he runs in 2024. Former UN ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, often mentioned as a possible 2024 GOP presidential contender, said Monday that she would not seek her party's nomination if former President Donald Trump opts to run a second time. Yes, said Haley when asked if she would support a second bid by Trump, in whose cabinet she served for the first half of his administration. I would not run if President Trump ran, and I would talk to him about it, Haley said, asked by the Associated Press if a possible Trump bid could preclude her own effort were he to announce first. Well, that's something that we'll have a conversation about at some point, if that decision is something that has to be made. Haley spoke Monday after touring the campus of South Carolina State University, a historically black college and university in Orangeburg, where current President James E. Clark showed her campus improvements, including a revamped student center and state-of-the-art cancer research and cybersecurity facilities. The visit was one of Haley's first public events in months in her home state since her 2016 resignation as South Carolina governor to join Trump's cabinet. Haley has maintained a delicate balancing act among Republicans who have in some ways been sharply split on the now former president. In 2 years at the United Nations, Haley treaded a path of speaking out against Trump while not directly drawing his ire. She left office on her own terms in 2018, a rarity then during a wave of staffing turmoil. Haley has made several moves in recent years to fuel speculation that her sights are on higher office. In 2019, she and her family moved back to South Carolina, purchasing a home in the Kiowa Island community. She also launched a political action committee, published a memoir, and commanded as much as $200,000 for speaking appearances. Republicans have already been grappling with the party's future following Trump's tumultuous term, but after the January 6th Capitol Hill violence as lawmakers gathered to certify Joe Biden's election victory, Haley said Trump had been badly wrong in stoking the crowd before the riot, telling an audience at the Republican National Committee winter meeting that Trump's actions since Election Day will be judged harshly by history. Haley also said that the whole notion was deeply disappointing because of the effect it will have on the legacy of the Trump administration, echoing remarks by some including fellow South Carolinian Senator Lindsey Graham, who called the melee Trump's self-inflicted wound. On Monday, Haley defended her former boss, who this past weekend lit into fellow Republicans, including his own vice president, saying he was disappointed in Mike Pence and calling Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell a stone-cold loser. I think former President Trump's always been opinionated, Haley said, asked about Trump's weekend comments and if they hurt the GOP. Just because he left being president, that's not going to stop. But I think what he also talked about were all the successes that he had in the administration. And I think that's what Republicans are uniting on. Every day Biden and Kamala Harris are in office unites the Republicans. The outing was Haley's first public event in her home state in months. It comes just 2 weeks before Pence, who is among those mentioned as a possible 2024 candidate, is set to visit South Carolina for his first public speech, a gathering with a conservative Christian nonprofit group. Now, former President Pence is also slated to throw his hat in the ring, so whether Trump gets in or rather whether Trump announces it or not is going to be rather interesting. Also going to be interesting to find out just who will sign up to, or who will toss their hats into the ring to challenge him. Leave a comment below who you support in the 2024 presidential primary. Also, let me know who you think will run, who you think won't run. And I'll see you in the next video. It's official. President Joe Biden is set to address a joint session of Congress on April 28th. Now, this is not a State of the Union address, which is normally delivered during the second year of the president. This is a joint session of Congress, so I have a few articles on it. This one from thehill.com, and it says Biden to address Congress on April 28. It says President Biden on Tuesday is slated to address a joint session of Congress on April 28, roughly 100 days after he took office. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California, invited Biden to make the address in a letter released publicly earlier that day. The president has accepted the information, a White House official confirmed late Tuesday night. Nearly 100 days ago, when you took the oath of office, you pledged in the spirit of great hope that help is on the way. Now, because of your historic and transformative leadership, help is here, Pelosi wrote in the letter. In that spirit, I'm writing to invite you to address a joint session of Congress on Wednesday, April 28, to share your vision for addressing the challenges and opportunities of this historic moment, Pelosi added. Newly inaugurated presidents typically make their first address to Congress within weeks of taking office, so Biden had so far not done so due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But with most lawmakers and a growing number of staff now vaccinated, it's a sign that congressional leaders feel more confident in gathering large groups in the House chamber. Still, Biden's first appearance before Congress as president won't look like typical joint sessions of the past. Numerous pandemic health precautions will remain in place, according to a Capitol official involved in the planning. There will be a limited number of House members and senators in the chamber. Some lawmakers will also be seated in the galleries overlooking the House floor to allow for additional social distancing. Lawmakers further won't be allowed to invite guests to the address, given that the visitors' galleries are still closed to the public due to the pandemic. The invitation comes after Biden secured his top legislative priority, a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package. He is now in the midst of trying to advance an infrastructure proposal, which is expected to receive action in Congress this summer. The president met with bipartisan lawmakers from both chambers on Monday to discuss his infrastructure proposal. The White House has said that it hopes to see progress on the package by Memorial Day, but it remains unclear whether, if any, Republicans will ultimately support the plan. Other priorities Biden may outline to Congress include passage of voting rights legislation and gun law reforms in the wake of several recent mass shootings. And of course, there's also this from FoxNews.com on the same topic. Biden will to address joint session of Congress on April 28. It will make the first time he has addressed Congress in person since becoming president. And it says, hold on a minute. And it says President Biden will address the joint session of Congress for the first time on April 28. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi issued a formal invitation for Biden to speak on Tuesday. The speech is scheduled to occur 98 days into Biden's first term in office. Nearly 100 days ago, when you took the oath of office, you pledged in the spirit of great hope that help is on the way. Pelosi in the letter, it was said in the letter. Now, because of your historic and transformative leadership, help is here. In that spirit, I'm writing to invite you to address the joint session of Congress on Wednesday, April 28, to share your vision for addressing the challenges and opportunities of this historic moment, she added. The White House has yet to formally respond to the invitation, though it can be assumed that it was agreed upon mutually with Democrat leaders. Biden's first speech to Congress will occur later in his first term than those of his presidential predecessors. Former President Barack Obama delivered his first speech to a joint session of Congress on February 24, 2009. Former President Donald Trump delivered his on February 28, 2017. Dating back to the Reagan administration, every president before Biden has delivered his first speech to Congress within his first 40 days in office. For presidents in the recent past, the speeches have been roughly 1 hour in length. Former President Bill Clinton spoke for 1 hour and 5 minutes, while George H.W. Bush spoke for just 48 minutes. Biden's first speech in Congress, to Congress, is not considered a State of the Union address. Those addresses are required under the Constitution, and the first is usually scheduled about 1 year into a president's term. Critics have accused the White House of limiting Biden's public appearances since he entered the Oval Office. The president held his first formal press conference on March 25th, roughly 2 months after his inauguration. Biden will speak to his administration, or as his administration attempts to garner congressional support for a $2.25 trillion spending package. The plan includes physical infrastructure projects such as upgrades for roads and bridges, as well as funding for Biden-backed policy initiatives such as enhanced job training and caregiving for elderly and disabled Americans. The president held an Oval Office meeting with the bipartisan support of lawmakers on Monday. To discuss the plan, Biden has publicly signaled a desire for bipartisan agreement, though Democrat leaders are said to be considering the implementation of special budget reconciliation rules to pass the bill with a majority vote if talks fail. And that's that, but yeah, so, I mean, I might take a listen to it here in drips and drabs. However, one thing that I'm definitely going to do is read up on it in my news briefing on April 29 and let people and give my take on it in the week in review video for that day. And there's a little more on this from the Associated Press. It says Biden to address joint session of Congress on April 28. President Joe Biden will address a joint session of Congress for the first time on April 28. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi extended the invitation to Biden on Tuesday to show your vision for addressing the challenges and opportunities of this historic moment. The White House said Biden accepted the invitation. The speech will come just before Biden's 100th day in office and will provide him an opportunity to update the American public on his progress toward fulfilling his promises. It will also give him a chance to make the case for a $2.3 trillion infrastructure package that he unveiled earlier this month, which the House is aiming to pass by the 4th of July. Traditionally, all members of Congress and guests gather for a joint session of the House, the larger of the two chambers. However, the address is to look different this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. Social distancing restrictions have been in place since the pandemic. They require House lawmakers to conduct floor votes and other business in smaller groups rather than convening hundreds in the chamber at once. Masks are required in the public visitors galleries, usually filled for such an event, have been closed throughout most of the pandemic. Details on the Capitol's preparation for the event were not immediately available. Presidents don't deliver a State of the Union address to Congress until their second year in office. And there's this from the USA Today. Biden set to give first formal address to Congress just before he marks 100 days in office. President Joe Biden is set to deliver his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday, April 28, just before he marks his 100th day in office. Biden accepted an invitation Tuesday night from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to address a joint session on that date. The White House confirmed. The speech will allow Biden to claim progress during his first 100 days, a benchmark historically for the presidency. A time for Biden's speech has not been announced. In a brief letter to the president, Pelosi asked Biden to share your vision for addressing the challenges and opportunities of this historic moment. Now, typically, all senators and House members of both parties, as well as Supreme Court justices, pack the House chamber for State of the Union and joint session presidential speeches, which fulfill a constitutional requirement, but fewer attendees are expected this year because of the coronavirus precautions. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that the White House is working with Pelosi's office on logistics and security measures, and the Speaker will decide who is invited and how many people can attend. Psaki said the president has been eager to address a joint session of Congress since he entered office. She said Biden will use a speech to highlight his efforts to back the economy, fight the COVID-19 pandemic, and allow and address global challenges. Biden's debut presidential speech to Congress will fall significantly later on the calendar than most previous presidents, including Donald Trump and Barack Obama, who both addressed Congress for the first time in February. Biden's presidential term began with heightened security at the Capitol following the January 6th Capitol attack and coincided with the Senate's impeachment trial of Trump. Democrats in Congress spent the next several weeks working to pass Biden's COVID-19 relief bill. Since its passage, Biden has put forward a $2.25 trillion jobs and infrastructure proposal called the American Jobs Plan that Congress is expected to take up in the coming weeks. And there's that. So, like I said earlier, it'll be interesting to see just what'll happen and what Biden has to say. I myself will be keeping tabs on it, most definitely in my week in review, or rather in my morning news briefing blog on Thursday, April 29, as well as in my week in review video for the week of May 1st. So definitely tune in to that. Let me know in the comments below if you're looking forward to Biden's joint session of or address before the joint session of Congress. What do you expect will happen? What do you want him to say? And I'll see you in the next video. As I had mentioned on Monday, the president is planning on packing the Supreme Court, and there are Democrats in Congress that agree with him and are trying to do just that. This coming from the USA Today, which the headline might be a little tricky, but one never knows just what no one knows even what the headline is from one day to the next. But this article was was updated from earlier this morning. No plans to bring it to the floor. Pelosi shoots down Democrat effort to expand Supreme Court. From the USA Today, Washington. Progressive Democrats introduced legislation Thursday to expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices, setting up a caustic rhetorical battle that Democrat leaders, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, signaled that they are eager to avoid. Now, though the idea of expanding the nation's highest court is drawing sharp criticism from Senate Republicans and has been largely dismissed by President Joe Biden, progressives are pushing the idea as a way to blunt the impact of President Donald Trump's 3 nominations to a court where conservatives now hold a 6-3 edge. But even before the lawmakers formally unveiled the bill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Thursday she had no intention of bringing it to the floor. The introduction came days after Biden created a 36-member commission to study potential structural changes to the Supreme Court. The president promised that commission during the campaign to head off pressure from the left, as Trump and Senate Republicans rushed to confirm an Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett last year. The court is out of balance and it needs to be fixed, Democrat Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts said outside the Supreme Court on Thursday. Too many Americans have lost faith in the court as a neutral arbiter of the most important constitutional and legal questions that arise in our judicial system. Pelosi told reporters Thursday that the idea should be considered, and she applauded the president's commission for doing just that, but she threw cold water on the bill itself. I think it's an idea that should be considered, and I think the president's taking the right approach to have a commission to study such a thing, she said. I have no plans to bring it to the floor. Progressive lawmakers and activists say adding seats to the court, which has been set at 9 since 1869, is the only way to curtail the conservative majority. But the legislation to expand the Supreme Court will face an uphill battle on Capitol Hill, not only because of Republican opposition, but also because of Biden's own position on the issue. After hedging for weeks during the campaign about whether he supported expanding the court, Biden said in October that he was not a fan of court packing. His commission announced Friday is not required to develop specific recommendations. Will explore options beyond adding to the court and has a 6-month deadline to complete its work. Conservatives nevertheless blamed the White House for the bill's introduction. Carrie Severino, president of the Conservative Judicial Crisis Network, slammed left-wing dark money groups for pushing the issue and accused Biden of changing his tune. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was non-committal with reporters Thursday about whether Biden supports the idea of expanding the court. Biden, she said, would make up his mind after seeing the result of the commission's work. He's going to wait for that to play out and wait to read that report, she said. The bill was introduced by several Democrat members of the House judiciary system, including its chairman, Representative Jerry Nadler of New York, as well as Representatives Mondale Jones of New York, and Hank Johnson of Georgia. Nadler dismissed concerns about over the legislation's future in the House and said Pelosi is a very good judge of events, and as the court hands down decisions on critical issues, Pelosi and others will come along. But the idea quickly divided Democrats as much as it drew scorn from Republicans. The Senate minority was Senate Democrat Rep. Dick Durbin told reporters that he thinks this commission of Biden's is the right move and called the movement on the issue historic. However, he was not immediately sold on the legislation to expand the court. The debate is wrapped up, he said, in Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell's decision to delay consideration of President Barack Obama's nominee to the court in 2016, Merrick Garland, but rushed through Trump's pick Barrett 4 years later. I wasn't happy with that, and I've said so. I want to make sure that our response to that is reasonable, he said, adding that he wasn't sure whether the bill would get a vote in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which he chairs. Markey addressed Biden's commission and said lawmakers are beginning the process of introducing the legislation, so the debate on this issue begins. Biden is operating on a separate track and we await his commission, but we don't wait for the introduction of the solution, the Massachusetts senator continued. Jones said he appreciates the president's understanding of the urgency of this, but called it interesting that there is no instruction to put forth recommendations. The damage has already been done. We don't need a commission to tell us that we need to restore balance to the court, he continued. McConnell spoke out against the plan Thursday on the Senate floor. He said the proposal is an example of court packing that represents a direct attack on the judicial branch, adding responsible people across the political spectrum have a duty to denounce this. The justices themselves, including those appointed by Democrat presidents, have also pushed back on the idea. Associate Justice Stephen Breyer said last week that such an alteration would undermine confidence in the court's decisions, weakening its hard-won power to act as a check on presidents of both parties and Congress. Though Democrats hold a majority in the House, it is a slim one. Representative Julia Letlow was sworn in Wednesday as Louisiana's first Republican Congresswoman, resulting in the Democrats' margin shrinking to 218 to 212. That means the majority can afford no more than 2 defections and party line votes. In the Senate, Democrats would need every senator from their side of the aisle and the 2 independents that caucus with them, plus 10 Republicans to vote in favor of the legislation in order for it to pass through the chamber and make its way to Biden's desk. The number of justices is set by federal statute, not the Constitution, and it has changed several times in the nation's history. Congress grew the court to 10 justices during the Civil War to ensure a majority for the Union policies, cut the nation's highest bench to 7 to deny President Andrew Johnson nominations, and ratcheted it up to 9 to give President Ulysses S. Grant majority support on the court for his monetary policies. But the idea of expanding the court has not gained substantive traction since President Franklin Delano Roosevelt attempted it in his second term. The idea failed and divided Democrats, but some scholars believe it pushed the court toward being more receptive to Roosevelt's policies. I'll get into what Roosevelt had said on the topic more a little later in this video, but yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. I mean, okay, like I had said Monday, some of Biden's policy, some of Biden's policies, about the commission I do agree with, that being term limits for the judges. As a matter of fact, I am a part of the Convention of States project, which uses Article 5 of the Constitution to propose amendments to this current Constitution, and one of the 3 pillars is term limits on all members of Congress, plus any federal office holder. That includes the aforementioned judges. As a matter of fact, Mark Levin had mentioned something on that. I'll get to that probably in either in another Weekend Review video or in a separate video. But yeah, so then there's this from Legal Insurrection, and William A. Jacobson, who is a law professor, and he wrote on it. Report Democrats for preparing legislation to pack Supreme Court, adding 4 new justices. We have covered extensively with Democrat threats to pack the Supreme Court. Perhaps those plans were just idle threats, similar to the threats by Sheldon Whitehouse and Chuck Schumer, meant to intimidate the judges. While it appears Democrats may be serious in trying, The Intercept reports Congressional Democrats plan to unveil legislation expanding the size of the Supreme Court on Thursday. According to 3 congressional sources familiar with the closely held measure, the bill would add 4 seats to the High Court, bringing the total to 13 from the current 9. The number of justices on the court has fluctuated widely throughout the course of the nation's history. Republicans currently hold 6 seats, while Democrats just hold 3 after the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the quick confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The bill is led by House Judiciary Committee Chair Jerry Nadler, Subcommittee Chair Hank Johnson, and Freshman Representative Mondaire Jones. In the Senate, the bill is being championed by Ed Markey of Massachusetts. The story is developing. We will follow the story as it develops. It is not clear that Democrats would be able to do this, as there are bound to be numerous defections in the Senate, maybe even the House, but the fact that Democrats are seriously considering it is shocking enough. House Judiciary GOP tweeted out, in case you missed it, Ryan Grimm just reported that Rep. Jerry Nadler is writing legislation to expand the Supreme Court. Jim Jordan asked if it was true. The chairman wouldn't answer. Sounds like the Democrats are running away from the bill before it's even introduced. And there's even more on this from the Washington Times by Alex Boyer. Democrats introduced bill to add 4 Supreme Court justices. Democrat lawmakers will introduce legislation to expand the Supreme Court on Thursday, jumping ahead of President Biden's recently created commission that's studying the pros and cons of hacking the court. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, Representatives Gerald Nadler and Mondale Jones of New York, and Representative Hank Johnson of Georgia will unveil their bill on the steps of the Supreme Court on Thursday. The legislation aims to expand the High Court from 9 justices to 13, and the lawmakers will defend their bill by setting historic precedent for Congress adjusting the size of the bench. The Supreme Court has had 9 justices since 1869. Prior to that, it fluctuated in size from 5 to 10 justices. The Constitution does not set a number of justices for the High Court. Mr. Biden's commission, created through an executive order last week, consists of 36 members and will examine the length of service and turnover of justices on the court, the membership and size of the court, and the court's case selection rules and practices according to the White House. They'll issue a report 180 days after the commission's first public meeting, which has not yet been announced, but progressive advocates have renewed calls to add justices to the bench in recent weeks, hoping a Democrat president can theoretically overturn the 6-3 majority of Republican-appointed justices into a 7-6 Democrat edge. Mr. Biden resisted the calls during his 2020 campaign to embrace expanding the number. Vice President Kamala Harris, though, supported the progressives' call during the Democrat presidential primary. Mike Davis, president of the conservative Article 3 Project, said lawmakers who are part of this effort should be ashamed of themselves. Democrats who have destroyed the independence and legitimacy of the High Court must be disavowed as political pariahs by every last one of their colleagues. Packing the Supreme Court would be a declaration of war that could not be undone. President Biden and Democrats in Congress should tread extremely carefully. Packing the Supreme Court is a red line they must not cross. If they actually love their country, they must stand out immediately, Mr. Davis said. Court watchers see the timing of Mr. Biden's executive order on the High Court is correlated with the outrage over recent comments by Justice Stephen G. Breyer, a Clinton appointee. Last week, Justice Breyer poured cold water on the notion of expanding the court, saying it could erode trust in the institution. Shortly after his comments, progressives launched a pressure campaign calling for him to retire. And there's that, but yeah, I mean, the timing does seem a bit off with this, but then again, timing has always been off. Not just with Democrats, but with all of those in Washington D.C. So what else is new? But I mentioned just a few minutes ago that there had been precedent for this, and we need look no further than what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did back in 1937. This coming from FoxNews.com. Flashback: FDR's attempt to pack the court in 1937. Decades before Joe Biden established a commission to explore an expansion of the Supreme Court, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt made his own push to pack the court in the midst of the Great Depression. Roosevelt pushed for Supreme Court reform shortly after he won a landslide victory in the 1936 election. FDR has faced pushback from the judicial branch on elements of his New Deal legislation, a slate of programs that some argued were unconstitutional. In 1937, Roosevelt proposed the Judicial Procedures Reform Bill of 1937. If approved, the bill would have granted the president the authority to appoint one additional Supreme Court justice for each sitting justice over the age of 70. At the time, that would have meant that FDR could appoint 6 more justices. For presidents seeking favorable court rulings on massive federal programs, the bill's passage would have marked a major windfall. Roosevelt's plan was widely panned by both parties and drew little support in Congress. At the same time, the Supreme Court issued several favorable rulings on FDR-backed proposals, including the National Labor Relations Act and the Social Security Act. FDR's court-packing bill was eventually brought to a vote, which failed 70 to 22 in the Senate. By Roosevelt's third term in office, he had appointed 7 of the 9 active Supreme Court justices. In 1983, Biden referred to Roosevelt's failed bill as a bonehead idea. The idea of expanding the Supreme Court drew renewed scrutiny in recent months as Democrats pushed to pack the court in response to the GOP's confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Top congressional Democrats are expected to unveil legislation to expand the Supreme Court by 4 justices on Thursday. And that's that. Now, like I said, you know, it'll be interesting, and I found many articles on it, some of which do touch on some of the same things in these articles, but there are different viewpoints, so I will definitely talk about this again tomorrow, and also probably a couple of days next week, so do stay tuned. And leave a comment below for what you think about court packing. Do you think that the Supreme Court should remain at 9 justices, or do you think that there should be more justices? You know, do you think that Biden is making a bonehead move and pulling an FDR? Do you think this will harm him? And both during the midterm election in 2022 and in the presidential election in 2024. Leave a comment below on this, and I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday I talked about the Democrats wanting to pack the Supreme Court, and I'm continuing that today. There's this article from Politico, which says Democrats to introduce legislation to expand Supreme Court. The measure would increase the court size to 13. House and Senate Democrats will introduce legislation Thursday to expand the number of Supreme Court justices to 13 from 9, drawing more attention to the debate surrounding court reform. The bill, led by Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, and Democrat Representative Jerry Nadler of New York, is the first legislation in recent years designed to add seats to the High Court, and its introduction comes as progressive organizations are pushing for court expansion after watching Senate Republicans fill 3 Supreme Court vacancies in 4 years under President Donald Trump. Brian Fallon, executive director of the liberal group Demand Justice, said that the bill represents a new era where Democrats have finally stopped conceding the Supreme Court to Republicans. He added that the task for progressives now is to build a grassroots movement that puts pressure on every Democrat in Congress to support this legislation because it is the only way to restore balance to the court and protect our democracy. President Joe Biden, however, has said he is not a fan of the idea, also known as court packing. Instead, the White House announced last week the creation of a bipartisan commission to study reforms to the Supreme Court and produce a report. The High Court currently has a 6-3 conservative majority. Now, while advocates have been pushing for the addition of seats to the Supreme Court, the bill won't see much movement in the evenly split Senate, with all Republicans and several moderate Democrats opposed to court expansion. The legislation is all but guaranteed to prompt attacks from Republicans, who during the 2020 elections warned that Democrats would expand the court if they took control of Washington. Justice Stephen Breyer, who outside groups are urging to retire before the 2022 midterms, recently cautioned against court packing for fear that doing so would only undermine public confidence in the institution. The issue, however, served as a litmus test during the 2020 Democrat primary for progressives. Democrat Senators Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Kamala Harris of California and Pete Buttigieg suggested that they were open to the idea, but others, including Biden and Independent Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont, who caucuses with the Democrats, did not back it. The number of seats on the High Court has fluctuated in American history from as few as 5 to as many as 10. Yeah, as I had mentioned, I believe yesterday, the Supreme Court is stuck at 9 thanks to an act by Congress in 1869 to limit the justices to 9. And of course, you had Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanting to expand it even more in 1937, which Biden said which Biden had called a bonehead idea and a terrible mistake. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But there's this from the Washington Free Bacon, and it's called Democrats Introduced Quit Packing Bill. Democrat lawmakers in both chambers of Congress introduced legislation to expand the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 justices on Thursday. Advocates say the measure is needed to rebalance the court and shift power from conservative justices who pose a threat to voting rights. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Democrat Representative Jerry Nadler of New York and Democrat Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts are the lead sponsors. The legislation is largely a reflection of progressive disappointment with President Joe Biden's commission to study judicial reforms, which was chartered last week. Though Biden appointed left-wing court-packing advocates to the panel, he also included a number of judicial conservatives and Democrat legal elites. It's uncertain whether the commission will propose sweeping changes. The bill's prospects are dim for the time being. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California said Thursday she does not support the bill and will not bring it to the floor. Senate Democrat Rep. Dick Durbin of Illinois, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, also said he's not ready to sign on to a court-packing bill and wants to see what Biden's court commission suggests. Durbin said, however, that he shares progressive frustrations at the way Republicans handle judicial confirmations. I want to make sure that my response to that is reasonable, fits into the cause of justice, Durbin told CNN. In response to unenthused Democratic leadership, their proposal is a potential target for the Senate. Filibuster advocates would have to shake loose at least 10 Republican votes to bring the bill to a vote. Congressional Republicans were united in announcing the bill. The Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative group, launched a national campaign condemning the proposal, backed by a $1 million ad buy. Apart from rebalancing, Nadler said the bill is a necessary administrative measure, given the federal judiciary's growing caseload. 9 justices may have made sense in the 19th century when there were only 9 circuits, and many of our most important federal laws, covering everything from civil rights, antitrust, the internet, federal regulation, healthcare, immigration, and white-collar crime simply did not exist, and did not require adjudication by the Supreme Court, Nadler said. But the logic behind having only 9 justices is much weaker today when there are 13 circuits. There is little evidence that the Supreme Court is struggling to stay on top of its work. In the 1980s, the High Court heard about 150 cases per term. The figure has fallen steadily since. This term, the justices are on track to hear just 58 cases, the lowest number since the Civil War. The reasons behind that decline are debated, but the historically light docket doesn't bear out concerns about judicial strain. Nor is there a relationship between the number of circuits and the quantity of the court's work, as Nadler's statement suggests. The circuits do not produce court-caliber cases at an equal rate. This term matters from the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals account for about 1/5 of the court's docket, but the justices are reviewing just one case from the Boston-based First Circuit Court of Appeals. Though circuit-by-circuit differences hold term over term, Justice Stephen Breyer panned proposals to expand the court in a Harvard Law School speech earlier this month. I hope and expect that the court will retain its authority, Breyer said, but that authority, like the rule of law, depends on trust. I trust that the court is guided by legal principle, not politics. Structural alteration motivated by the perception of political influence can only feed that perception, further eroding that trust. Progressive judicial activists recently called on Breyer, 82 years old, to announce his retirement at the end of the court's term in June. So they're really wanting to get Breyer out of the way. But yeah, I mean, like I said yesterday, I am against court packing, and many people say that court packing is tilting the balance one direction or another, which is not true, as had seen in the articles yesterday and today. But I Ironically, Nancy Pelosi weighed in as well. This coming from theblaze.com. Nancy Pelosi says court packing bill won't get a vote. The speaker has no intention to bring it to the floor. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is opposed to an effort by some congressional Democrats to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 and will not permit such a bill to come to the House floor for a vote, at least for now. During her weekly press briefing on Thursday, Pelosi said that she's not necessarily opposed to expanding the court, but for now will wait for findings from the commission President Joe Biden to establish to study the issue. I support the president's commission to study such a proposal, Pelosi said, telling reporters that the House's focus for the time being is on infrastructure. I don't think that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's an idea that needs to be considered. And I think the president's taking the right approach to have a commission to study such a thing. The speaker said, according to the New York Post, it's not out of the question. It's been done before, she continued, noting that the history of our country a long time ago, and the growth of our country, the size of our country, the growth of our challenges in terms of the economy, etc., might necessitate such a thing. Earlier that day, House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Democrat Representative Jerry Nadler of New Jersey, says New Jersey here, and they made a mistake. He's actually from New York. And Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, proposed legislation that would expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court to 13. We're not packing the court, we are unpacking it. Nadler said in a news conference about the bill on the steps of the Supreme Court. Republicans stole the court's majority with Justice Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation completing their crime spree. Senator Markey said in a statement, of all the damage Donald Trump did to our Constitution, this stands as one of his greatest travesties. Senate Republicans have politicized the Supreme Court, undermined its legitimacy, and threatened the rights of millions of Americans, especially people of color, women, and our immigrant communities. This legislation will restore the court's balance and public standing and begin to repair the damage done to our judiciary and democracy, and we should abolish the filibuster to ensure we can pass it. Pelosi, however, told reporters that she had no intention to bring the bill to the House floor. Besides, even if it were to come up for a vote, it's unclear if the bill would have enough support to pass. Democrats hold 218 seats and cannot afford to lose more than 2 votes from their party on any bill because tie votes fail in the House. In the Senate, there is no chance for a bill to pack the Supreme Court to be introduced. There is no chance that a bill to pack the Supreme Court would be introduced without an immediate filibuster attempt from Senate Republicans, pushing the number of Senate votes Democrats need to advance the bill to 60. And there's no guarantee President Joe Biden would even sign the legislation. On the campaign trail in 2020, Biden said he is not a fan of court packing, although last week he created a commission to study proposed reforms to the judiciary to placate progressive activists. So we see here that, Pelosi says that it won't get a vote, but, she may just be saying that in front of the camera, but behind the camera, she might be saying, yes, it will be it will be pushed to the floor. And one thing that Senator Markey said that I disagree with is that the Republicans stole the court's majority. They did not do that. They just wanted originalists, strict constructionists, and constitutionalists on the court because that is one thing that had been lacking. So they basically just affirmed the fact that the Supreme Court looks to our Constitution for guidance on any topics, but who knows about that, especially since, as I had brought out in previous videos, Washington D.C. has a constitution of its own. And no, I'm not talking about the about the Act of 1871, which only dealt with the District of Columbia. Rather, I'm talking about the annotated Constitution, which I had brought up in in videos when I discussed the Convention of States and Article 5. So I'll get more into that soon, but for now we have one final article, this coming from BizPack Review, and it's entitled Flashback. Biden called packing the Supreme Court a bonehead idea and a terrible mistake. President Joe Biden, who just established a commission to study the impact of expanding the Supreme Court, once said that packing the court was a bonehead idea. The president's potential support for packing the court would be a strong deviation from his former thoughts on the matter. Video footage shows he spoke out against court packing in 1983 when he was a United States Senator, criticizing former President Ronald Reagan's attempt to replace members of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, according to Fox News. Biden compared Reagan's efforts to former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's attempt to add 6 justices to the Supreme Court in 1937. The publication reported, President Roosevelt clearly has a right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that, Biden said at the time. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct. There's a video and there's a tweet flashback thread. Remember when Biden asserted that packing the court is a bonehead idea? But it was a bonehead idea, the former Delaware senator said. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put into question if for an entire decade the independence of the most significant body in this country, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Biden refused to address whether he would pack the court during the 2020 presidential campaign, insisting that he would not provide such an answer until at least 180 days into his presidency, and after he had received a recommendation from a bipartisan commission on changing the Supreme Court. If elected, what I'll do is I'll put together a national commission, a bipartisan commission, and I will ask them to, over 180 days, come back to me with recommendations as to how to reform the court system. It's not about court packing, he said in October. He added, there's a number of alternatives that go well beyond court packing. The Biden administration announced the establishment of a commission to study the impact of expanding the Supreme Court on April 9, and the White House did not immediately respond to a request from the Daily Caller News Foundation. And there's that. So, like I said, it'll be very interesting to see just what this commission has in store, and it'll also be interesting to see if Pelosi and Schumer will agree to that. But leave a comment below for what you think about court packing. Also, let me know what you think about what Biden had said in 1983 compared to now. And I'll see you in the next video. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Rick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.